I never thought the woman I loved could do something like this. But when she grabbed a wine bottle and hurled it straight at me, I realized Melissa wasn't my wife anymore. She was a stranger, a completely different person. My name is Daniel. I'm 38 years old, and the owner of a small but growing cafe chain. 6 years ago, I thought I had the perfect family. At least, that's what I believed. I married my ex-wife, Melissa, when we were young and ambitious. She was an elementary school teacher, a job she once claimed to love. When our first daughter, Lily, was born, she decided to stay home to take care of her. I supported her decision. I wanted her to have time with our child, and I worked tirelessly to provide for our family. 3 years later, our son Jacob was born. But instead of happiness, Melissa changed. She became irritable, lazy, and completely uninterested in our family. She stopped playing with the kids, stopped cooking, stopped cleaning. I worked long hours, only to come home to a house in chaos. Dirty dishes, screaming children, and a wife who refused to lift a finger. Instead, she spent her days glued to the TV, watching reality shows. At first, I thought she was just struggling with post-pregnancy stress. I tried to be patient. I even hired a housekeeper so she wouldn't have to do anything. I hoped that, with time, she would recover and return to the person I married. But she didn't. Every day, she drifted further away from us. Lily, who was only 6 at the time, became afraid of her own mother. She would flinch whenever Melissa raised her voice. I endured this for 2 years, trying to keep our family together. But I couldn't take it anymore. One day, I decided to talk to her, to be honest about how I felt. "The kids need you, Melissa. I need you. I can't do this alone," I said. She looked at me with cold, empty eyes. "If you can't afford to take care of your family, that's your problem, not mine." I clenched my jaw. "I'm not asking you to do everything. But you can't just sit here all day. I work, I clean, I take care of the kids. What do you do?" She scoffed, letting out a bitter laugh. "Then make more money. If you were half the man you think you are, you'd hire a full-time nanny instead of bothering me." That was the moment I knew. I had already lost her, but I still wasn't prepared for what happened next. I took a deep breath, trying to control my anger. "Melissa, if this is really how you feel, then we need to have a serious talk about our marriage." Her eyes narrowed. "Are you threatening me?" "I'm not threatening you," I said, my voice steady. "But I can't keep living like this. Either you change, or this marriage is over." I had no idea that one sentence would push her over the edge. She stood up, stormed into the kitchen, and when she returned, she was holding a bottle of wine. I thought she was going to drink, but she wasn't. She lifted the bottle and threw it at me with all her strength. I didn't react in time. Glass shattered against my shoulder, red liquid spilling down my shirt. The pain burned like fire, but something hurt worse. Realizing that the woman standing in front of me was no longer my wife. Lily screamed. I turned to see my daughter standing in the hallway, frozen in terror. That was it. That was the final line. I turned back to Melissa, my voice cold and steady. "Get out of my house. Now." She blinked, as if she couldn't believe what she'd just heard. "You can't kick me out." "You just attacked me in front of our daughter. Get out." I reached for my phone, ready to call the police if I had to. Melissa's eyes darted between me and the shattered glass, and finally, she took a step back. But I could see the hatred in her expression. I didn't know if I was scared in that moment. But I did know one thing. Our marriage was over. What I didn't know was that the real nightmare had only just begun. I thought Melissa leaving would bring peace. I thought my life would finally return to normal. I was wrong. For the first few weeks after she moved out, things were quiet. Too quiet. I focused on my kids, trying to rebuild some sense of normalcy. Lily, my daughter, had stopped flinching at every sudden noise. Jacob, my son, finally slept through the night without waking up crying. It wasn't perfect, but it was better. Then, out of nowhere, Melissa started calling me again. At first, it was about the kids. "I miss them," she would say, her voice thick with fake sorrow. "Let me see them." I wanted to believe she had changed, that maybe, away from me, she had realized what she had lost. So I agreed. On one condition. Every visit had to be supervised. She agreed too quickly. I should have known something was off. Melissa started showing up at our scheduled meetups, dressed like she was going to a party instead of seeing her kids. Tight dresses, perfectly styled hair, expensive bags that I knew she couldn't afford. She barely paid attention to the kids, always checking her phone, always distracted. Then, one night, Lily asked me something that made my blood run cold. "Daddy, why does Mommy say she's gonna marry Uncle Jason?" I froze. "What?" "She said Jason is going to be my new daddy," Lily said, frowning. "Is that true?" Jason, my best friend, my business partner, the man I trusted with everything. I couldn't breathe. My mind raced, trying to make sense of what I had just heard. Jason had been there for me when everything fell apart. He had helped run my cafe when I was struggling to keep up. He had been my shoulder to lean on. And now, he was sleeping with my wife? I didn't want to believe it. But deep down, I knew it was true. The next day, I went to my cafe early. Jason was already there, leaning against the counter, sipping coffee like he hadn't just betrayed me. I stood there watching him, my fists clenched at my sides. "How long?" He looked up, confused. "What?" "How long have you been sleeping with my wife?" The cafe went silent. The employees stopped what they were doing. Jason's face paled. Daniel, man, listen. Don't lie to me." My voice was calm, too calm. "Just tell me the truth." He exhaled sharply, rubbing the back of his neck. "It just happened, okay? After she moved out. She called me. She needed someone to talk to. One thing led to another. I felt sick. My best friend, my wife, they had both stabbed me in the back. I took a step closer. You knew what she did to me. You saw everything, and you still—" "I didn't plan for this, man," Jason interrupted. "I swear. But she told me you treated her like a prisoner, that you forced her to be a housewife, that you—" I laughed. A cold, humorless laugh. "And you believed her?" Jason looked away. That was all the answer I needed. I turned around and walked toward the office. Jason called after me. "Where are you going?" "To call my lawyer." I locked myself inside and dialed immediately. If Melissa thought she was going to take my kids away from me and play happy family with Jason, she was in for a rude awakening. But just as I thought I had control, the betrayal cut deeper. That night, my parents called me. I expected them to be furious at Melissa. I expected them to side with me. Instead, my father's voice was eerily calm. "Son, you need to think about what's best for the kids." I gritted my teeth. "I am." "No, you're thinking about yourself." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. She cheated on me, with my best friend, and you're telling me to consider what's best for the kids? "She's still their mother, Daniel," my mother chimed in. "You can't just erase her from their lives." "She erased herself," I snapped. "She walked away. She threw a bottle at me. She ignored them for years. And now she wants to play happy family with Jason? She made mistakes," my father said, "but she deserves another chance." I clenched my fist so tightly my nails dug into my palm. "Whose side are you on?" "Daniel," my mother sighed. "We've been talking to Melissa." My stomach dropped. "What?" "She reached out to us after she left," my father admitted. "She told us everything. She regrets what happened. I hung up. My own parents, the people who raised me, the people who were supposed to have my back, had been secretly talking to my ex-wife, the woman who destroyed my marriage, the woman who abandoned my kids. I sat in silence, staring at the floor. The weight of everything crushed down on me. Melissa had betrayed me. Jason had betrayed me. And now, my own parents. I thought the nightmare was over. I was wrong. It was only just beginning. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in my office, staring at the darkened screen of my phone, my mind racing. My parents had betrayed me. Jason had betrayed me. Melissa had betrayed me. It felt like the entire world had turned against me, and I had no idea who I could trust anymore. The next morning, I made my decision. I called my lawyer and told him I wanted sole custody of my kids. No visitations, no loopholes, nothing that would allow Melissa to worm her way back into their lives. She had abandoned them once. She would do it again. But just as I thought I was taking control, something else happened. Something that made my blood run cold. I arrived at my cafe that afternoon, expecting a normal day. But the moment I stepped inside, I knew something was wrong. The employees were whispering, avoiding eye contact. Jason wasn't behind the counter like he usually was. Instead, he was in my office, sitting in my chair, smirking. "Good morning, Daniel," he said, leaning back casually. "We need to talk." I clenched my jaw. "Get out of my chair." Jason ignored me. He tossed a document onto the desk. "You might want to read this first." I hesitated before picking it up. The words hit me like a freight train. Buyout agreement. Jason was trying to steal my cafe. I gripped the paper so tightly, my knuckles turned white. "What the hell is this?" Jason chuckled. "Melissa and I have been talking. She thinks the cafe is just too much stress for you right now. Given everything that's going on, I figured I'd help lighten the load." I slammed the document down. "You think I'm stupid? You think I don't see what this is?" He shrugged. "Look, man, you're dealing with a nasty divorce, a custody battle. You've got enough on your plate. Maybe it's time to step back. Let someone else take over." Someone else. Him. That's when it hit me. Melissa wasn't just trying to take my kids away. She and Jason were trying to take everything. I leaned in, my voice dangerously low. "Let me make something very clear. You will never get this cafe. You will never get my kids. And when this is over, you and Melissa are going to wish you never crossed me." Jason smirked, but I saw the flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. "We'll see about that." I turned and walked out. My heart was pounding, my mind racing. This wasn't just about betrayal anymore. This was war. I needed a plan. But before I could even begin, my phone buzzed. A text from my mother. "Daniel, please come over. We need to talk. It's important." I didn't want to go. I didn't trust them. But something in my gut told me I needed to hear whatever they had to say. So I drove to their house. When I walked in, my parents were already sitting in the living room. My father looked tense. My mother was clutching a piece of paper, her hands trembling. She looked up at me, eyes full of regret. "Daniel, there's something we need to tell you." She handed me the paper, a bank statement. My stomach twisted as I scanned the numbers. Large withdrawals, thousands of dollars gone. The recipient? Melissa. I looked up sharply. "What is this?" My father sighed heavily. "Melissa, she told us she needed money, that she was struggling, that she couldn't afford to fight you in court." I could barely breathe. "You gave her money?" "We thought we were helping," my mother whispered. "We thought she just wanted to see her kids." I felt my pulse pounding in my ears. "How much?" She hesitated. Then, in a voice so small I almost didn't hear it, she said, "Almost 50,000. I stumbled back like I had been punched. $50,000. My own parents had funded the woman who was trying to destroy me. I couldn't think. I couldn't speak. Then my father's phone rang. He answered it without thinking. And the moment he did, Melissa's voice echoed through the speaker. "Did he believe it?" she asked eagerly. "Did he fall for it?" My blood turned to ice. Melissa wasn't struggling. She was lying. She had played my parents like puppets, and they had handed her the knife to stab me in the back. I looked at my father, my hands shaking with rage. "You gave my ex-wife 50 grand while she was sleeping with my best friend, while she was trying to take my business, while she was planning to take my kids, and now you expect me to forgive you?" He paled. "Daniel, son, I grabbed my keys and stormed out. As I got into my car, one thought burned in my mind. Melissa thought she had won. Jason thought he had won. My parents thought they had fixed everything. They had no idea what was coming next. Comment the number 1 if you want to see how Melissa will pay for this. Melissa thought she had me cornered. Jason thought he had outplayed me. My parents thought they had fixed everything. They had no idea what was coming. I spent the next few weeks doing exactly what they expected, staying quiet. I let Melissa think she had the upper hand in court. I let Jason believe he was wearing me down. I let my parents assume I was simply cooling off. But behind the scenes, I was building my counterattack. First, I hired a private investigator. I wanted every single detail on Melissa and Jason: bank statements, text messages, social media activity, everything. I needed proof, not just for my custody case, but for something much bigger. And what I found? It was worse than I imagined. Melissa and Jason weren't just together. They were planning to take over my cafe and sell it. Jason had already started reaching out to potential buyers, acting as if he was the rightful owner. Melissa had forged my signature on certain business documents, attempting to transfer partial ownership of the cafe to Jason. And the cherry on top? She was using the money my parents had given her to fund their little scheme. I had enough. It was time to end this. The next morning, I walked into my cafe like I owned the place, because I did. Jason was behind the counter, looking far too comfortable. The moment he saw me, his smirk returned. "Daniel, man, good to see you. We should talk about that buyout offer." I dropped a folder onto the counter. "Actually, we should talk about this." He frowned, flipping it open. His face drained of color as he scanned the contents. Bank transfers, emails, contracts with my forged signature, evidence of him and Melissa trying to sell my business behind my back. "You didn't think I'd find out?" I asked, voice calm. Jason swallowed hard. This isn't what it looks like." "Oh, it's exactly what it looks like," I said, pulling out my phone. "And by the way, I already sent this to my lawyer and to the police." Jason's eyes widened. Wait! "Forgery, fraud, attempted theft," I continued. "You're done." The cafe employees, who had overheard everything, stared at him in shock. Customers began whispering. Jason's face turned red as reality sank in. "Daniel, please, man." "You have two choices," I cut him off. "Leave right now or leave in handcuffs." He didn't even argue. He just grabbed his things and ran out, shoving past customers like a coward. But I wasn't done. I walked out of the cafe and drove straight to the courthouse. Today was the custody hearing. Melissa had no idea what was coming. She walked in, head held high, acting as if she had already won. Her lawyer smirked at me. "Ready to finalize this?" I didn't respond. I just handed my lawyer a flash drive, containing every piece of evidence the private investigator had gathered. The moment the judge reviewed the documents, everything changed. Forgery, fraud, her attempt to steal my business, her attempt to sell my cafe behind my back. Her lawyer's smirk disappeared. Melissa turned to me, panic creeping into her eyes. "Daniel, wait!" I didn't even look at her. The judge granted me full custody on the spot. Melissa lost everything: no visitation, no control, no power. As the gavel slammed down, she collapsed into her seat, completely shattered. But the final blow? The police were waiting outside the courthouse. Jason had confessed everything to avoid a harsher sentence. He had thrown Melissa under the bus without hesitation. The officers approached her. "Melissa Carter, you're under arrest for forgery and fraud," she screamed as they cuffed her. "Daniel, please, don't do this." I stood there, watching, feeling absolutely nothing. She did this to herself. She had spent years trying to tear me down. Now, she was the one falling. After the trial, my parents called me. Again. "Daniel, you can't just—" I cut them off. "I can, and I did." My father sighed. "She's still the mother of your children." I clenched my jaw. "And you're still the people who gave her 50 grand to try and destroy me." Silence. "I'm done with both of you." My mother started crying. "We were trying to help." "No, you were trying to fix something that couldn't be fixed." And then, for the first time in my life, I blocked my own parents. No more betrayals, no more manipulation, just peace. Jason fled the city. Melissa served time and lost every legal right to my kids. My cafe thrived. With Jason gone, my business boomed like never before. As for my parents, I don't know. And I don't care. Because for the first time in years, I was free. For the first time in years, my life was finally peaceful. My cafe was thriving, my kids were happy, and Melissa was nothing but a memory. Or so I thought. It had been 6 months since Melissa lost everything. Her kids, her freedom, her so-called relationship with Jason. She had been released early from jail on probation, but she had no job, no money, and nowhere to go. Jason had disappeared. My parents had been cut off, and the world had moved on without her. I should have known she wouldn't stay gone. One evening, I was closing up the cafe when I heard a knock on the glass door. I turned, and there she was. Melissa. She looked pathetic. Her hair was a mess, her clothes were cheap and wrinkled. The arrogance she once carried was gone. I stared at her through the glass for a long moment, then unlocked the door. "What do you want?" Her eyes filled with fake tears. "Daniel, I have nowhere else to go." I said nothing. "I lost everything," she continued, voice trembling. "You won. I get it. But please don't let our kids grow up without their mother." I let out a cold laugh. "You mean the kids you abandoned? The ones you tried to take from me? The ones you haven't asked about once since you got out?" She flinched. "I was lost, okay? I made mistakes." I crossed my arms. "You didn't make mistakes, Melissa. You made choices, and every single one led you here." Her expression twisted. The act dropped. "You can't keep them from me forever," she hissed. "They're still mine." I stepped forward, lowering my voice. "Legally, they're not. You gave up your rights. You lost them. Just like you lost everything else." Tears welled up in her eyes. But I didn't feel a thing. For years, I had suffered because of her. Now she was suffering because of herself. She took a deep breath. "I have nothing, Daniel. No home, no money, nowhere to go." I tilted my head. "And?" She stared at me, realization dawning. "You're really going to let me suffer?" I held her gaze. "You didn't care when it was me." Silence. Then, her face crumpled. She collapsed onto the ground, sobbing. Right there, in front of the cafe, where anyone could see. But I didn't care. I turned, locked the door, and walked away. A few weeks later, I got a call from my lawyer. Melissa had tried to petition the court for visitation rights. She thought she could manipulate the system. She thought playing the pitiful mother card would work. But she was wrong. The judge took one look at her history. The abandonment, the fraud, the arrest, the failed manipulation attempts, and denied her permanently. No appeals, no second chances. She was done. Melissa disappeared after that. Some say she left the city. Some say she was living in shelters. I never bothered to find out. Jason? He never recovered. His name was blacklisted in the industry, and no business owner trusted him again. Last I heard, he was waiting tables in some rundown diner. As for my parents, they tried to reach out, tried to make amends, but I had learned my lesson. Betrayal doesn't deserve forgiveness. I was finally free. My kids were growing up in a loving home, without manipulation, without lies. My cafe was more successful than ever, expanding across multiple locations. And as I stood there, watching my children laugh and play, I realized something. Revenge wasn't about getting even, it was about winning in the end. And I had won. Comment the number 1 if you think Melissa got exactly what she deserved. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories like this.